Bento, Goncalves?
Goncalves.
It's hard. Well, I'm 2 years in, I'll get it. Goncalves is a second-year PhD student in my lab over in ecology and evolution, and hails from, now I'm going to let him pronounce it because we did practice yesterday, but he got his bachelor's degree in biology from
Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul.
What he said. And in Brazil working on central Amazonian birds. Coming here, Bento's research has shifted maybe a bit more towards the computational end, as you'll see in his talk today, but very much sitting at that interface of visual computing for biogeography. So today we'll be talking about some of the work he's just starting doing on multi-scale convolutional neural networks for pack-eye seals. And as you'll see, because this is right at the beginning of Bento's PhD work, it's very much new stuff, and Bento and myself are interested in getting some feedback because there's definitely opportunities to change direction or pick up some new techniques. So with that, I'll start with Bento.
Thanks for introducing me. So thanks everyone for coming. I'll be talking about my work with finding seals in satellite imagery and using deep learning. So I'll start by giving like a brief outline of what the talk is going to be. I'm going to start with saying like why should we even bother counting seals? Some of the features about Antarctica and the Southern Ocean biology that are relevant for detecting seals. Then I'm going to go a little bit on how our model is going to work, what have you tried so far, what has worked, what didn't work, and we'll show some sample output and where are we heading next. So to begin with, we're all worried about climate change and all that, and it's not clear how is it affecting the Southern Ocean, because we don't have that same pattern you get in the Arctic where you have an extensive loss of sea ice all over the Arctic. On the southern pole, some places are losing ice, some places are actually gaining ice, and this is very important because Antarctic krill is really tied to sea ice, and that's a really important factor because everyone in the Southern Ocean depends on, virtually everyone depends on Antarctic krill, but krill is really difficult to count because they're very small, they live underwater, they have a patchy distribution. So the only way we can really estimate how much krill do we have is by its predators, and seals are really important krill predators. And they're also convenient to count when you compare them to, let's say, fully aquatic predators, because they're tied to land for reproduction and molting. So we get the chance to count them. So Antarctica is the southernmost continent. It has the Earth's south pole. That's very important for us because it's going to affect what parts of the year we're going to get light, and the sun is always going to be at an oblique angle, so that's going to affect like how shadows are going to affect our images. It's very large. It might be hard to grasp how large it is because we don't have any other landmass close by, but if you put the US on top of it, you get an idea, and that gives you an idea about how hard it is to sample all its coastline. So extremely harsh, it's far away, like it's not the place you want to go for sampling the whole coastline. And there's a really complex pattern of sea ice gain and loss through seasons and throughout the years. So to give you an idea about how much it changes during a single year. And again, we're looking for animals that are tied to where do we have sea ice and where we don't, and it's very important to understand how the sea ice is going to change here. And that brings us to sea ice, which is has been a main concern for polar scientists for quite a while, and it's something that we got very good at detecting. It's not very hard, really. It's just we have dark, highly absorbing seawater and light, highly reflective ice. And we want to find those places where we have this contrast, and we probably are on some place with sea ice. But though it's easy to detect, we're not only interested in finding sea ice. We need to know what type of sea ice do we have in a specific location, because it's very tight what life forms we're going to have under it. And for the purposes of this talk, we're only going to separate it into fast ice and pack ice. Fast ice is held fast to the shore. It's stationary, while pack ice is floating on the ocean. It's very dynamic, moves around, and you can get it in a different location in hours or so. So just to give you an idea, the Antarctic food web is very simple as far as food web goes. Krill is at the center, and what we're interested in are seals, because we can count how much krill we get. We can estimate how much krill we have with seals. So krill is very small. It has a great biomass, and everyone depends on it. There's a big fishery industry based on krill. It's supposedly the purest source of omega-3 fatty acids. And it depends on ice because it feeds on phytoplankton underneath the ice shelves. They have cone structures in their appendages that filter phytoplankton. And so, as I said, like over and over again, pack ice seals are the important consumers of krill. And from this we go to, I'm going to be talking about seal biology for quite a bit now, and I'm going to focus on the properties that are important for detection settings, like how gregarious they are, what time of the day they spend on sea ice, and we're going to distinguish seals here into two groups. The ones we're interested in are pack ice seals, which haul out on sea ice, but we also have land-based seals that haul out on land. It makes it harder to distinguish them because the background is no longer white, but we know where they're going to be from year to year, so this is not a detection problem. We're really looking at pack ice seals here. And when we talk about pack ice seals, the species that we're really concerned with are crab-eater seals, which are the most abundant, and we can actually assume that every seal is a crab-eater until we know better, because they're way more abundant than the others. So they eat primarily krill. They have this specialized tooth morphology. It works like a whale's baleen. It's something for filter feeding, and krill is going to get stuck on those projections. And it's medium-sized, not so big as far as seals go. Haul outs during the day, and it's the most gregarious of the pack ice seals. You can get quite large groups, and it's also the most abundant species of krill. We estimate something about like 15 million of them, but we really don't know. It could be anywhere from 7 to 30 according to modern estimates, but yeah. Weddell seals will eat krill, but they mostly feed on squid and fish. They're larger than crab eaters. Maybe the difference is big enough that we will be able to see in the very high resolution satellite imagery. They haul out during the day, but mostly in the afternoon, and they're not as gregarious. They stay in smaller groups. Leopard seals are different from the other ones because they're second only to killer whales in the Southern Ocean food web. They're predators, big carnivores, and they have this long, slender body, about the same size as a Weddell seal, sometimes a little bit bigger. Females are larger, but probably not enough that we should be able to tell on satellite imagery. And a key point here to differentiate them from Weddell seals is that they're mainly solitary. So We're not expecting to find groups of leopard seals holding out together. And the last species of pecci seals is Ross seal. Eats mainly squid and fish. It's the smaller species we have in the group. Females are larger, but again, probably not enough that we should be able to tell on satellite imagery. And we really don't know a lot about them. This is virtually the only picture of a Ross seal you'll ever find if you try to Google it. Now we go to the land-based seals. There's only two species here. The southern elephant seal, which eats squid and fish, dives deep for it. It's really big. Bulls reach like 5.8 meters and 4 tons. They're much larger than females, about 4 times as big. And again, detection is not the problem here. They're going to gather in the same places every year in large colonies. And the last species I'm going to talk about is Antarctic fur seal. It also gathers on land in large colonies, preys on krill, fish, and squid. All the species I've been talking about so far are true seals, but fur seals are eared seals. It's a different taxonomic group, and you can tell because they have outer ears. They're small, males are larger, and they gather in large breeding colonies. So, with that said, like, how can we count those seals? The first attempt to count crab-eater seals and all pecci seals really was Apis from 94 to 99. So every line you see in this image is a transect done by helicopter, and those are degrees of latitude and longitude. So this is, as you can see, it was a big effort. It involved multiple countries, but every country had their own little different methodology, and they pulled the data that brings us a lot of problems here. And it was very costly. They had to get down there with helicopters and icebreaker ships and all that. And the coverage is not very impressive if we take into account the large size of the Antarctic coastline. And we're still publishing results from that. Yeah. So we think that satellite imagery could be a way to avoid those costs and get wide coverage. So I'll be mainly, when I say satellite imagery, I'm only dealing with very high resolution satellite imagery. The ones we have access to with high resolution are QuickBird 2 and WorldView 3. Those numbers for panchromatic resolution get to something a little bit better than this. This is true crawler. It's not as finely grained, but you can clearly see like something that's not much larger than a seal here. Like you can see the details on cars, and give you an idea about how big would a seal be on that resolution. Show you how a seal compares to the size of a car here. This is a male elephant seal. This is a pickup truck. It was a pickup truck. Yeah.
Is he trying to get on top of it?
No, like he thinks the car is another male because it's so big. It can only be another southern elephant seal. Go figure. Yeah. Not very smart.
Can I ask a question about the satellites?
Yeah.
Do they take pictures? How frequently are pictures taken?
So they have to circle, right? The ones with higher resolution are staying. They're orbiting at a lower altitude, so
Right.
they visit the same point about once at every 20 hours or so.
No, I'm more asking when it takes a picture.
Yeah.
How many pictures does it take? A second, an hour? Does it take one picture then and then it waits 10 minutes?
I think it goes faster than that, but I cannot give you a precise number. But yeah, it's a good question actually. Don't know.
It is because all modern microphotography is done by quick multiple images to integrate things. Now, I just have no idea whether satellites do that. But anybody who does macrophotography now takes 100 pictures and integrates them. 100 pictures in a second, or 100 pictures in 10 seconds, or 100 seconds. But it gives you a very resolved image.
These take them in strips that overlap, but I don't know. I think it's probably a fraction of a second between any overlap. So it's just like, a strip of overlapping photos, and then it's gone. So I don't think that it takes. It may have some overlap, but I don't think that we don't get them integrated in that way. We get the overlapping panels.
Yeah, sometimes even 10 pictures taken really quickly within a second. That even, there's enough that software can give you a better picture than one.
Yep.
Just for ID, it might make a big difference.
So this Australian group here, you can barely see the name here, McNeon and collaborators tried to use satellite imagery to count elephant seals, and they're quite successful. They had a ground count, and they compared it with they assigned some participants to try to estimate how much seals there were by counting those black points here, and they're using 50 centimeter resolution imagery here, which we have better imagery now. So if they can see elephant seals with this, we should be able to see our seals with more view 3 imagery. But this setting is easier than finding pack ice seals on sea ice for several reasons, such as I said, they're gonna be in the same places. It's not a detection problem. We just have to count them. And they're larger, but it's actually harder in the sense that the background is not white. So we're not looking for black spots in white background. So can we do it for our seals? The answer is we can do it manually, and if we would search the whole satellite image in the magnification that would allow us to find seals, it would take forever. But the way we do it is that we look at contextual clues at a lower magnification, and we go on into them until we get into it's not worth it to look for seals unless you expect to find the features that they're associated with, like cracks in the. You need to go back to the water and back to the ice. So this feature here is associated with cracks in the sea ice, so we can look for seals here. But if you magnify like this region here, the points you get in the end are quite similar. Like if you would run a kernel looking for circular objects here, you would find seals and rocks, and it would say it's the same thing. So we really need to focus on the context information here, because they're not. You cannot tell them apart unless you know the big picture. And this takes a really long time to do manually, and so what we're trying to do is automate it. And for many reasons, we believe it can be done. We have all the imagery. Deep learning is getting better and better, and GPUs are getting faster and faster. But we're going to need a bunch of training samples if we want to train a machine learning model to do that. And fortunately, we have a collaborator doing a citizen science work with counting seals, and we could get a training set from them and then move on to train our model. So our problem is not a typical remote sensing problem. It's not a typical object detection problem. It merges features of both. And a typical remote sensing problem, we have multispectral information about images, where if you try to classify a picture, you only usually have RGB. But here we go deeper into infrared and into UV, and we typically classify every pixel or something. We don't expect to get objects that are bigger than 1 pixel. We're interested in masses that do not have a fixed size, like a patch of forest or something. We don't expect it to be of a particular size, and we typically use hand-drawn features here. We don't have any fancy feature extraction going on, and all the background variation gets binned into intra-class variation. In a typical object detection problem, we're interested into objects that have several pixels. They often have we expect them to be of a certain size and a certain aspect ratio, and that's going to change as you go farther from the sensor. Like, you're going to need a pyramid of windows to get objects that are farther upon. If we use deep learning, feature extraction is going to happen during training, so you don't need to design filters to look for it. And background variation is important. So our setting, we do have multi-spectral information in geo-reference points. We're going to see that could be very important because we can relate particular images with environmental features like temperature, time of the day, and it goes on. Distance from the nearest water point, and the objects of interest, which are not a single seal, but we're looking at whole groups of seals, have several pixels. We expect them to be of a certain size, and every object is going to be at a 90-degree angle from the sensor, so we don't need to use a pyramid here. And there's going to be a combination of learned features and hand-drawn features, because we're not going to, we can do some habitat suitability modeling with environmental features associated with every point here. And background variation is going to affect accuracy too. So,
Bento?
yeah.
Does it help in having learning algorithms to start at a larger scale and look at the color of the ice or the color of the water as you move along the shore? Is there any correlation between that and an appearance of a concentration of population?
The problem is that even if there is one, like you need a labeled training set that tells you like what are you looking for.
Right.
And we don't have it right now. It might learn something if we feed in the environmental features and let it train. It might learn
The
something.
water having more chlorophyll A would be my first thought. Second would be the thickness of the ice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This
Must have a color correspondence.
it's gonna be all there. You can learn it if we have the information. If we have the training samples too. Yeah, but it's definitely important. Yeah. So
Sorry, you mentioned also you had a training set from someone who'd taken pictures.
we're getting it. Yeah.
So how do you map that on? But then your actual training is going to be a satellite image. So do you just kind of map that on, or how do you do that?
So everything is geo-referenced, right? So if we have the exact location of where the seal was found, we can easily get all the information and where it is.
So the last step of actually detecting the dots is sort of easy. What you're saying is
Yeah.
where they are is...
Yeah. It's hard to find where do we have a whole group of seals.
Okay.
Once we know that, it's just we can use it. I'm gonna show you in a minute. We just need a.
But just to clarify, I will say that the citizen science program is also a satellite imagery. So
Yeah.
that citizen science.
Oh, I
is
thought
also-
it
Yeah,
looked
yeah.
like a...
You can
Yeah.
see.
I didn't understand.
Yeah, so.
You can take a look here. Yeah. This is a screenshot from the actual website where you can count them. And this is a satellite imagery.
I see.
Today's scale 3 is the picture, unfortunately, but it's satellite.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's how a model's going to work from the raw imagery to the seal counts. So the first step here is to buffer out dark areas and areas that are too far from the coastline. Like we removing areas that we are not likely to find a seal, and areas that even if there was a seal there, we're not going to be able to detect it. Then we use the environmental covariates to buffer this thing through a habitat suitability model, which is basically we based on the environmental covariates, how suitable this area is for a seal in a scale from 0 to 1, and then we set a threshold. Like everything that's less suitable than, let's say, 50%, we cut out of the imagery to reduce the amount of images that we need to process. And then we sweep through the imagery, flagging groups of seals we find. And once we have the location of the groups of seal, we just need to run like a simple blob detector or another circular kernel or something. Yeah. So why can't we skip to the last part? I've showed you some of the clues already, but rocks or shadows can be very similar to seals. Context is key. We can see a linear feature there, the sea ice. And orientation and number of seals is also important because we expect groups of seals to be of particular sizes and at a certain distance from one another. We expect some arrangement on it. And rocks can have very different arrangements from that. And it might not be possible to design, to hand engineer a filter that will run through it and get through the context information. So we think the way to go is machine learning, and more particularly convolutional neural networks. So I'll give you just a brief overview on neural networks. They're inspired in biological neurons. They've been around for a really long time. What we're really doing here is just, if we think of every element here as a neuron, and every incoming input as a dendrite and an axon going, axon going out, we're gonna learn like what's the importance of the input coming from this neuron, and that's what we're training in a neural network, and we end up making a decision in the end. And they were largely supplanted by SVMs in the late 80s, early 90s until 2012, where AlexNet came out. Since then, convolutional neural networks have been the state of the art in computer vision. They're very data hungry and computationally intensive. We had the architectures before, but we didn't have the big training sets, and we didn't have the fast GPUs, so they were not really feasible to use. But now we have the GPUs, we have the training sets, and so the kernels neurons are only locally connected, so we need fewer parameters when we run convolutions through it. That allows us to get bigger input images on it. And an important thing here is that you don't feed it any hand-drawn features like local binary patterns or histogram of oriented gradients. It's going to learn its feature representation while it trains, while it goes from shallow to deep. You get like more high-level abstractions of your images. And I'm mostly using Café as my deep learning framework. I've tried TensorFlow too. There are some others that are worth mentioning. But Café is done by Berkeley Vision. He has good GPU support, CUDA and QDNN bindings. The really convenient thing about Café is the model zoo, where you can share the models you've done and you've trained and weights, and it's very easy to get pre-trained models. There's an active community, so for debugging and all those purposes, it's really good. And it's focused on vision, but it's now branching out a little bit. We've tried a few models, but to mention the ones that we found that really could work here. First one is Squeezenet. It's a really lightweight convolutional neural network. It has about 50 times less parameters than AlexNet. It was originally thought to be something that you could put on a portable device. It doesn't require a lot of memory. It's fast to compute. And we think it is a good idea to use something like that because of the great extent of the coastline. So we might go lightweight. And the key feature here are these fire modules that are very similar to, I'm going to show them later, the Inception architecture. It's basically, instead of having to choose between using, let's say, a 3x3 convolution, a 5x5 convolution, a 1x1, I do all of them, concatenate it, and you expand and squeeze, and they have many layers of those fire modules in the whole network. It's really not expensive on memory and computation. So a heavyweight option here is Inception V3. This one is by Google. It has about 200 times more parameters to train than Squeezenet, but it's still better at doing that than AlexNet, which is the reference CNN that everyone, if you train a new CNN, you're going to compare it to AlexNet. It's the benchmark. And you can think of CNN here as something built out of Lego blocks, and you're choosing which kinds of structures you want to use here, and there's no real, you can try to do something like post hoc to see why this works or why it doesn't work, but while you're doing it, it's an art so far. No one really has like a rule of thumb on how should you do it. You just assemble what usually works and hope it's going to work. Try to combine different features that usually work and see how they go together. That's how people go on it. So up to this day. And so one thing I mentioned is that we have those environmental covariates, and we want to edit with the CNN and train it at the same time. So we would have basically, we pass our images through a CNN, we extract one of the later layers, the output from one of the later layers. It works like as a high-level abstraction. Then we get the environmental covariates here, append it to the output from a deep layer, and we'll have a vector with things that come from the image itself and environmental covariates of the image, and we can train them at the same time. And what we will end up having is something that it's at the same time I have a suitability model and an image interpretation thing. And we can train a new classifier with the resulting vector that has both environmental features and image features. And so far, we don't have the training set yet, so this is just running it with the pre-trained model for general image classification. And from here, we have three options, three ways to go. We could either try to remap one of the classes to seals. Let's say they always say that seals are shower curtains. We can say from now on, shower curtain is seal. Or you can remap multiple classes to one if you want to. And or we can fine-tune it, basically remove the last layer that does the classification, and add a new one that only looks for seals and rocks, and then we train it again with our training set, but without discarding the weights. Or we can train a CNN from scratch. But yeah, we still have very few training samples to do that. So I'll show you the big picture of how we intend it to work. So far, all we have is a raw imagery. And we need a label training set and to extract the environmental covariates of every point that we have in the label training set. So we run the raw imagery through the habitat suitability model to extract the parts that we think that might have seals. We mask the imagery, extract the high-level features, combine them with environmental covariates, and train them using the training set to get a classifier. With the classifier, we can get seal points and feed them back to the training set and train the habitat suitability model with them. Once we have a working model, we can try to run it for continent-wide coverage, gather seal data set, and then we can see what's going on with seal populations. So just to give you an idea about how much storage, yeah.
So with the deep level features that you're extracting, are you able to give any interpretation to what they actually mean? Or because there are famous examples of
If you
neural networks. Say, I mean, there's that famous example of the car that was always looking at the grass on the side of the road, and then when it came to a bridge, it just sort of drove off the road because the bridge didn't have grass next to it. You know? But it was a neural network, but it was a black box. You see, that's the problem.
So yeah, you can visualize the layers. I have a picture that kind of shows it.
Well,
So
that doesn't mean anything to me. Those pictures.
it's hard to see on this one, but we can actually, you can try to see what's the image with something that we call deconvolution. You get it from the high level, you can try to reconstruct what's the image that's going to give the highest classification score for a car or something, or for bridge, or for road. And then you're going to see your grass there in this case probably, somewhere. It looks very weird, but it's something that you can do. You can try to visualize what's going on in all the layers. Like in the first layers, you're going to have very simple things like looking for edges, and as we go deeper, we're looking at actual parts of the object that you're interested in. And yeah, so a single word view tree image covers about 15 by 15 kilometers. That's 4.2 gigabytes at 16-bit depth. It takes about 20 minutes in my laptop to run through, to extract high-level features from one word view tree image. So if we wanted to do it for the whole coastline, that would take 1.5 years with an okay GPU, but not, I mean, the ones you can get today, you can probably do it in 6 months with one computer, which is not so bad, I would say. And yeah, so the next steps we have to do are remind you that this is in a really early stage, and this is all we've done so far, and what we're thinking about doing now is we're getting the training set from the citizen science collaboration. We'll fine-tune Squeezenet or Inception or other neural network with pre-trained weights to seal detection, train our seal detector and have the suitability model. Then we can train a CNN from scratch, and we can compare the counts we get from a region where we know how many seals there are at that time, and see how it goes, see how reliable it is before we try to extend it through the whole continent. And one thing that we are thinking about doing, but we're still very far from it, it's getting at species level identification with those features I told you, like how big are the groups, how far apart they are, and yeah, so that's it. Any ideas, suggestions?
What's the dispersion of, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay, go ahead.
I'm just wondering what the dispersion of these crab-eater seals are.
We don't know.
Because if you're working in elephant seals, this seems like a waste of time. Just because elephant seals are concentrated in abundance, and they sit in certain areas. So this type of algorithm would be probably very inefficient relative to doing something, some on the ground thing. So the question is, how is the dispersion so widespread that it's worth it to do this? This is the first question I would ask.
You mean the range?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it is. They're all over the coastline. It's, if you think about it, here's the South Pole, and you're gonna have the same conditions and the same latitude all over the circle here. So
Yeah, but that's true for a whole bunch of types of marine mammals, and yet this one apparently, from what you're saying, is much
and
more evenly distributed than some of the others are.
it's not, I wouldn't say evenly distributed, but they haul out on pack ice, which is moving all the time. So they can be patchy, but you don't know where those patches gonna be. You see what I'm saying? Even if they're concentrated, they're not gonna be concentrated at the same spot from year to year. Because the substrate they stay
Yeah.
on is moving.
I guess one thing that bothers me about this is that there are kind of two things one would like to know. And not being interested in how many seals there really are, say personally, whereas a conservationist would be very interested in knowing how many seals they are. That's one way of looking at it. As an ecologist, I might be interested in how seals are integrated into the ecosystem. And that would make me be looking for proxies of where the seals ought to be aggregated.
Yeah.
Which would lead you to a very
It's
different
something
type
that
of,
I'll have to think
approach.
about that. Yeah.
I guess, well, first to Jeff's comment, I mean, I think without the data, it's hard to say anything.
We don't know
You're
so
generating
far.
a data product, and then you can say something ecologically. But could you go back to the big picture slide? Okay, so it's hard to identify seals in this imagery, right? Like, I know you guys argue about this, like, oh, that's a seal, that's not a seal. So citizen scientists are gonna have a hard time identifying these seals. So,
Absolutely.
you have this data from Michelle, but you don't know, it's not true gold standard data because they're not true positives, you know what I mean? So you're gonna feed that in and get all these things. Like, I imagine it's gonna be very important to
Yeah, some
take a spectrometer, go to a seal pellet and say, this is the spectral signature of the seal, and feed that into this, you know, workflow somehow. And I'm wondering, how difficult do you think that's gonna be? Is it non-trivial, or like, where does it go in? Is it like at the level of the environmental covariates going in? Because you might have, you know, your high level of abstraction there, people might just be putting it on rocks.
So if
you know? But then there's like some level where you can filter that spectrally and say, oh, well, these clearly are not rocks because of the spectral signature. These are clearly seals, you know?
Yeah, but when you say spectral signature, you mean on the multispectral range?
Yep.
But we don't. I think we might get to the resolution WebView 3 that we would get the spectral signature of a seal. I'm not sure how different it would be from a rock.
I think
But
it's more.
it's something, yeah. If there is something, it should learn it. We have all the.
But like, so, okay, so the training data.
If we trust the training data.
Oh, so the training data you're feeding in though, that's just people clicking on images. Like,
Yeah.
that's not using the spectral signature of all this. So
Yeah.
that's like a sort of a separate thing that you have to do, right?
No, but we let's say. Oh, but here's the thing, yeah. It's actually a problem, but let's say we get training data with the points. They're all georeferenced. So even if she has it on different images from a different satellite with different
You
resolution,
can go back to that satellite.
we can go back to our satellite and look at that place at that time.
Right.
But we might not have the image at that place at that time. But yeah.
Well, she has it, I think you could probably get it. But I mean, either, I was just wondering if you plan to feed it in to the CNN, or if it's like an after thing. You just filter, you know, whatever, you get all these things afterwards, and then you determine, is it truly, according to the spectral
So,
signature, seal or rock after?
The pre-trained CNN expects the image to be of a very specific dimension. Like it's gonna have to be RGB. It's gonna have to be like 227 by 227 or 224 by 224. So I could only add those later.
Right.
Yeah.
I can say I can almost guarantee that seals won't be spectrally different than rocks.
But they won't be?
No, I don't. Well, not in the bands that we are likely to have, unless we can get the near infrared. You know, I don't. I would guess that would be a good. I'd be surprised. I would hope that we could tell a difference of the seals will.
Yeah.
So one of your main connections, I guess, in biology is how much you're able to gauge how much krill that there is around the Antarctic.
Yeah.
So and you can do that based on how many seals that you count, and then how much krill they eat
Mm-hmm.
per day or whatever.
We can get like a lower bound of how much krill we need to have these seals alive at this moment.
Okay. So is there any concern about double counting, or like how you overcounting the same populations? Like how frequent do they come back to the same spot, or
Mm-hmm.
you might be able to model that sort of error?
There could be something, yeah. But we have the timestamp of every image, and we know the satellite takes. We know how long does it take to complete a whole orbit. So, yeah, we could probably model like what's the probability of a seal popping out into.
I guess I would maybe think about it a little differently, which is that you have some underlying density of seals, and the imagery is just one's realization of that process. Do you know what I mean? It's a snapshot, so it's like, rather than saying like, literally counting seals and adding the number of seals, it's like these are realizations of that underlying process that you're sort of integrating over the density of seals. That if you're imagining it being like a Poisson process, like, oh, there's so many density in the water, but we got 4 on ice. Do you know what I mean? As
Right.
opposed to just like adding up,
Yeah. Okay.
because it's gonna change from minute to minute.
Yep.
Can you go back a slide or two to the one where you had 3 pictures? Right here, this one. So you're convoluting, you have an image, and then you basically go and find rank. How do you associate the error with that involved through each of these convolution layers?
So I'm extracting the output from the last fully connected layer of the last layer before I classified, and I use it as if it were a feature and train a whole new model. So I'm not doing any training in the convolution here. But yeah, it would be really hard to put the environmental covariates like.
Right, because my question is, when you move from the low-level feature to the mid-level feature, you do the convolution operator.
Mhm.
So there has to be some sort of, you're going from coarse to kind of medium.
Mhm.
So there has to be some sort of loss of, I guess, some sort of error that might come up in that operation. So my question was exactly how you quantify it, but you're saying that you actually train each pixel or something?
No, so this is a pre-trained model, right?
Okay, if we don't work off of that, if we just look at low level to mid level,
Okay.
so then how would you quantify your error? How does your error basically propagate from a coarse to a mid?
So it goes from you won't have any error until you get classification, right? You need to know like if you're right or wrong in the end. But before you get a decision, you have to go through the whole CNN. And when you get the error in the end, if you're right or wrong, you do something called the back propagation, and it's basically you calculate the gradient for the last parameters and see how can I change this value to.
Alright, so you're basically working backwards to optimize your parameters.
You go from the end to the beginning,
So
and
you do like the maximum likelihood estimation.
you actually take partial derivatives, and then you send the gradient back, and it can be a problem sometimes depending on what
You
kinds
guys
of.
mentioned one of your models has a lot of parameters. So now if you were to take that parameter space, which is like, what was it, like 200 parameters or something?
No, they usually have on the orders of millions or billions of parameters, but it has 200 times more than the other. Yeah.
Is back propagation just like gradient descent?
No. So gradient descent is the it's the process where you optimize a neural network by doing iterations, right? You get at every iteration you're gonna do back propagation,
Yeah. Okay.
but back propagation is it's based on the chain rule, And the idea is that the error of, if you think of every layer as a function, you're trying to get the error from one function times one function times one function.
Right, so you move them backwards, so you basically move from like fine to like coarse.
Yeah. And that's going to happen at every iteration of the gradient descent.
Okay.
Yeah.
My second question is, have you used Yokoda on any of the Alera GPUs? Because you're using your own personal laptop, right?
Yeah. So, no, I haven't used it. We have GPUs here, right? Yeah.
Actually, I have a question kind of related to your question, and because we're sort of new to some of this, certainly me, new to some of this visual computing. My sense is that there's two kinds of errors. One is a loss of image fidelity, say, as you kind of go through these lower level features to the higher level features. And in that case, that kind of error would mean that you'd lost some key features of that raster image. But then the other kind of error is a misclassification of seals. And I imagine that it might be possible to have a lot of, to have high loss in the fidelity of the image, but still get really high classification rates on the seals. Because really what that would be the ideal, is that you've sort of compressed it down to just those features that were really important for seals. And so it's a low fidelity image, but somehow you still have high classification rates. But anyway, it's sort of a question, I don't know if that's the right way to think about it, but it does seem there's two
It's something like,
kinds of
yeah,
errors at play.
if you try to visualize the later layers, it's going to be something like, what's the shape that would give the highest
So
classification?
there's almost a bias already introduced into this because you're introducing your factors that you assuming the strongest correlation with where the seals or something along those lines would be.
Yeah, you get it based on your training samples, but yeah, it learns that. Yeah. So, yeah.
Is any of the training take into account the spatial distribution of the seals? Like, so for example, spatial distribution of rocks versus spatial distribution of seals. You have to hope that seals don't like to each sit on a rock. But if they're different, that would be, I would assume, be good.
So yeah, we would have to know, like we would have to train it and see the last layers to see what's the stereotypical features that lead the model into believing that this is a group of seals. Like maybe it's gonna rely on the exact position of distance from one seal to another, let's say. Like it could learn that, but we haven't done it yet, so we don't know.
Well, I guess what I was trying to ask is, could you introduce into the algorithm external data? For example, those helicopter surveys, and have that as a starting data set or set of parameters that aid in the training.
So you can do two things when you have let's say you already have a model, it's trained. You can either train it from scratch, like throw all the weights out and start again, or you can update the weights. It's like you keep the weights you have so far, and you train on top of that.
Right, I mean, for example, neural networks with vision.
Yeah.
One model is you're looking at something, and one of the hardest things to study in vision is things coming from outside of vision into the field of vision. It's a very hard thing to study. But you do have a base of looking forward, and the acuity as a function of off angle and so on. And you could program that in, and then add in this. So you do have predetermined model.
Kind of to Jeff's question, because this sort of predates Bento a little bit, one of the things that we've been trying to do is using the spatial statistics of seals and imagery to differentiate species, because their behavior drives typical aggregation size and sort of what's their personal body bubble, you know what I mean, when they're on the ice. And so you can immediately tell, despite the fact that one's on land and one's on ice, you can tell fur seals and elephant seals. You can tell them apart because their behavior is driving that, and I think that will be useful to this last bit that Bento was talking about, in that there's a typical crab eater seal aggregation that's going to be distinct from a lone, from like
Leopard
a
seal.
couple of Weddell seals, you know, and the individual seals may not be distinguishable, but the context of that behavioral aggregation might provide.
And even season, if you're after the season where pups are produced, you're going to have a lot of
So I think we have all our images stored on BGC, right?
No, we have them all locally here on Drobos. Just these like connected hard drives. So these like moving forward though, which is kind of your question, I think we could look about from maybe within the lifetime of Bento's thesis, up to upwards of 50 or 60 terabytes would be the scale.
Yeah. So about the GPUs, this is so well parallelized inside the GPUs that we can probably get away with only having a couple or maybe 3 or 4 GPUs. That should be enough to do the whole coastline.